Hi, everyone. This is Bobby Hargis, and this is another lecture in a series of lectures brought to you by Mediation Training Company. Today, we are talking about one of the most common questions I get from people who are interested in becoming a mediator. And that question is, how do I become a mediator? What training do I need? What experience do I need to become a mediator? So that is what we are talking about today. If you are viewing this lecture for credit, there will be several code words or phrases that appear throughout the lecture. They will be on the screen for you to jot down, because in order to receive credit, you must send that information in to me, and that would be the certification that you have viewed this lecture. There is a handout associated with this lecture. You should have that as you follow along. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the requirements for becoming a mediator, primarily in Louisiana and Mississippi. Every state differs, but I train lawyers, mental health professionals, licensed professional counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, clergy people, and others in those states. So we're going to talk about Louisiana and Mississippi. And part of this lecture is contained in a more detailed lecture on the training hours. We're not going to go over those in great detail. We're not going to be looking at the statutes, but I have summaries for you for both states. There is a marketing component, and there's a component about giving speeches and other things like that. So we're going to talk about how to get business as a mediator. I started wanting to get business as a mediator in 1990, and that was a few years ago. And I've been mediating continuously since 1990. And for some of you, that may be more years than you have been alive. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that I did that worked, some of the things that did not work, so that you cannot, or you will not make my mistakes. Of course, you're going to make your own mistakes. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the document that you should all have. So you want to become a mediator. What is involved? That's what we're going to be talking about today. There's a little bit about my background. You can read that on your own. I'll be referring to my background and experience as I go throughout this lecture. So, what is involved? First of all, you need to develop a specialty. You need to join ADR sections of the Louisiana State Bar, the Mississippi State Bar, or other organizations that have a group of lawyers or other professionals that might be using your services. You want to get trained as a mediator. You want to market yourself. We have a lecture and a half, I think, on just marketing. We're going to cover that a little bit here. If you get trained and you don't have mediations, you want to make sure that you get some volunteer mediations. Most judges will send cases to you if you volunteer early on. That's a quick way to get some mediation training. This is an image from back in the early 90s. I would say probably 94, 95. My wife tells me it looks like our son, Blair. But this is when I started. So I want to tell you my story about becoming a mediator. Your story may differ, but the goal here is to give you some insight as to what a new lawyer, when I started, I was 4 years as a lawyer. I started in 1990. I was initially licensed in Louisiana in 1986 and in Mississippi in 1987. So my story, what happened? You have a goal. I'm assuming that because you are viewing this lecture, you have some interest in mediation. You may want to become a mediator yourself, or you may be just interested in how people become mediators. I started being a construction lawyer at a firm in New Orleans. And I handled construction cases. I represented architects, owners, surveyors, surety companies, insurance companies, and others in the construction industry. When I say construction, I mean people who build things, bridges, high rises, commercial structures, industrial structures. And because you always have multiple people on the project, there are many times problems. So I worked as a construction lawyer for 3 years. I had some arbitrations, I had some trials, even participated in a summary jury trial, which is another method of ADR back in the late 80s. I was trained in February of 1990 as a mediator. I had heard about mediation, wanted to get some experience, and so it was a free training program for me at Harvard Law School, where they offered to any law student the ability to get trained. So I was trained. And once we were trained, Harvard, and along with the other law schools in the Boston area, there were about 10 different law schools, and they had mediation programs, and we would go out to the small claims courts on a Friday morning, and we would mediate. I ended up mediating in 1990 in the spring, 6 small claims court cases, and they all settled. And I said to myself, Self, this is a good process. It works. People were happy when they left. At that point, I graduated and I began teaching at the University of Mississippi. And back in 1990, mediation was so new that I could give a speech for 1 hour about what is mediation. Of course, people know what mediation is now, so we talk about mediation training, mediation advocacy. There are a lot of other different aspects, but I could give an hour. So I would go anywhere. I remember once I lived in Oxford when I was at Ole Miss. My wife was in New Orleans. And so a lot of times I was in New Orleans, and I can remember flying to Memphis from New Orleans instead of driving, and took a little small plane to Tupelo from Memphis. You may say, why fly? Well, because it was cold, it was snowy, so I didn't want to drive. So anyway, I remember speaking to about 400 or 500 people. It was the North Mississippi Claims Adjuster Association, or some name like that. And they were beginning to get interested in mediation. So I spoke to them. It was a big group. I was on the panel of another group, and it was the AAA, the American Arbitration Association. And I began to get business. And I will say this, you will hear me say this many times. Whenever I speak about mediation in front of a group, I get cases from that group. So one thing you want to learn to do is to talk about mediation. When I started mediating, I started doing construction mediations because I had some familiarity with the construction industry, having worked for 3 years as a construction lawyer. I think I had participated in 3 trials, maybe 4 trials, 2 or 3 arbitrations, a lot of negotiations. So I had some knowledge of mediation. I had some knowledge of construction. So I merged those and became a construction mediator. After you get a certain amount of experience, you wanted to leave your initial area, and I started doing personal injury mediations. Little did I realize that the personal injury mediations would be the bulk of my mediation for the rest of my life. Because what fuels personal injury mediations is the list of companies that are insurance companies who want to limit their liability. So a lot of the national and international insurance companies, they like to mediate. And so I've done now, over my 30 plus years, hundreds, if not thousands, of mediations that were of the personal injury type. And then I started doing construction mediations. Then I started doing family mediations. And after becoming a good mediator, and I remember counting my first 100 cases, I kept a list because I wanted to get 100. And of course, after that, I stopped counting. Then I became a construction arbitrator, because what you learn is you know about the industry, and you become a neutral. So I was, I think, pretty good as a mediator, and I wanted to add to my list of skills. So I became a construction arbitrator. Interesting story. When I started as a construction arbitrator, I was 6 years out of law school. So it must have been at that time, 1992. I remember asking or applying for the AAA panel, the American Arbitration Association. You will hear me say the AAA. And my first application was denied because AAA at that time, I'm not sure what their requirements are now. They required that each arbitrator have 10 years of experience in some area. Where I had worked as an electrical engineer with Lockheed Martin. It was at that time General Dynamics. And I had practiced law for 3 years. I had been a mediator for 2 years. I didn't have 10 years. So basically, I petitioned the board of directors of the AAA, basically saying, I have a JD, I'm a lawyer, I have a master's in ADR, I teach mediation, and they allowed me to join their arbitration panel. So one of the points is when you see no, someone denies you, think about another route. So I didn't take no as an answer out here. I became a construction arbitrator with basically 6 years as a lawyer instead of the 10 that was required. Then I became a labor arbitrator. As you may know, labor arbitration deals with disputes between employees of a company and the labor union that represents the employees. And then I don't have this on here, I believe, I became a FINRA, Financial Industry Regulatory Authorities. It was a securities arbitrator. And for those who want to become a neutral in other capacities right away, you may want to look at FINRA. I think it's finra.org, and you can probably research on how to become a mediator. And then I became an attorney fee dispute arbitrator with the Louisiana State Bar Association, and also in Mississippi. And then I became a special master. I think you get the point. I started adding to my toolbox different skills. One of my friends who was a judge in the mid-90s, we were young lawyers together, and we were members of bar associations. One thing that you'll hear me say, join bar associations, local, minority bar associations, and others, and become active. Don't just join and get their emails. Join committees, and you get to know people on those committees. And I didn't realize at the time, but a lot of the people who are on committees with me became district court judges, appellate court judges, and Supreme Court justices in Louisiana and in Mississippi, people who I started working with as a young lawyer. And then I became a complaint hearing officer. So at some point I said, wait, I'm a mediator, I'm an arbitrator, I'm a special master, I'm a complaint hearing officer. And so now when people ask me what I do, I say, I'm a neutral. They say, you a what? I say, I'm a neutral. So you have to brand yourself. So, and that gives me an opportunity when people don't understand. It gives me an opportunity to say, I do A, B, C, and D. So let's talk about marketing a bit. Develop a mediation strategy, or I could say a strategy as a neutral, because some of you may start as an arbitrator. Define your market. My market when I first started mediating was the state of Mississippi, because I was a professor at Ole Miss, and we taught 2 or 3 days a week, and I had a day or two where I could do other things. And so I started mediating at the Bar Center in Jackson. That was my office. I was Bobby Harge's attorney mediator. And so my market was Mississippi, because my first 2 years of teaching, I taught there. Again, my wife was in New Orleans, and after 2 years at Ole Miss, I was employed by Loyola, and we've now been living in the same residence for the last 30 plus years. So how do you define your market? Look around. Is your market Jackson? Is it North Mississippi? Is it the coast in Mississippi? Is it New Orleans? Is it North Louisiana? You need to define your market. How do you reach people? What service do you offer? Who's your competition? You need to know at all times what your competition is doing. You need to know at all times. So how to become a civil mediator today? We're going to talk about Louisiana, and then we're going to talk about Mississippi. There are some professions where you can start and you don't need a license or certification. For example, makeup artist, unarmed security guard, auctioneer, a residential painting contractor, a funeral attendant, interior designer, travel agent, home entertainment installer, pest control worker, florist, and finally, as a civil mediator in Louisiana, you need no qualifications to become a mediator because it's not regulated. Now, many people find that surprising, but that is the law. Those are the rules. So as you see here, so you want to be a mediator. No requirements to become a civil mediator in Louisiana. But if you want to be on a list, there is a list kept by the Louisiana State Bar Association ADR section, just like there is a similar list in Mississippi. We'll get to that in a moment. But if you want to be on that list, and by the way, I don't get any cases from the list, maybe 1 or 2 a year. It's not anything to talk about. You have to be an attorney licensed for 5 years and have 40 hours of mediation training. If you're not an attorney, you must have mediated 25 disputes or engaged in 500 or more hours of dispute resolutions. And you have to have 40 hours of training. If you are a former Louisiana district, appellate, or Supreme Court judge for at least 10 years, you need no training to be on the list. But again, remember, you don't need any training just to start. You can start today. You need only convince others that you offer a skill and that you can assist them in resolving their dispute. To remain qualified after your initial training, you are required to accept 2 annual pro bono assignments from your local court and participate in 10 hours of ADR, of alternative dispute resolutions, in a course that's approved by the MCLE committee or the ADR section every 2 years. The course is offered by Mediation Training Company or approved by both the MCLE committee of the Louisiana State Bar and the ADR section of the Louisiana State Bar, as well as the Mississippi Bar ADR section and the Mississippi Bar Department of CLE, Commission on CLE. So let's talk about becoming a family mediator. On the left side, if you are one of an attorney or psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker, marriage and family counselor, professional counselor, or clergyman, you need to have 40 hours. And part of that 40 hours must be simulated co-mediation training. Now, it could be actual training by another mediator, but most of the time people go through a class and you do role plays, and that would be the 8 hours that you need. But if you're not a lawyer, psychiatrist, psychology, social worker, marriage and family counselor, professional counselor, or clergyman, you need 6 to 8 hours, but you have to have a college degree. Years ago, the statute simply said you have to have a college degree. And there were some people who had a 2-year college degree or a 3-year college degree who wanted to become mediators. So the statute was later changed to say a 4-year college degree. Now that doesn't respond to what if you get your college degree in 2 years, a bachelor, or 3 years. I think the objective was to have a bachelor, at least a 4-year degree. You may not take 4 years to get it, but I think you get the point. If you are a judge, a former judge, city court judge, parish court judge, family court judge, juvenile, district, appellate, or Supreme Court judge with at least 10 years of experience, you only need 28 hours. But if you are a former family court judge or a judge who had family cases in a statutory family court for at least 3 years, then you need 20 hours, but you still need the co-mediation training. Any course that you take has to include these items. You need to know a little bit about the Louisiana judicial system, procedures, ethics, confidentiality, child development, family systems theory, communication skills, and the mediation process in Louisiana, and how to execute documents for the clients who come before you. Not all mediation courses in different states have the components that must be included, but Louisiana does. Mississippi, I don't think, does not. In order to remain a family mediator, you have to complete 20 hours every 2 years. So if you go back and you look at the civil, it says to be on the court list, you need 10 hours every 2 years. But to be on the list of family mediators, and just to be a family mediator in Louisiana generally, you need 20 hours. Our first code word is attend. ATTEND. You can see it at the bottom of the screen. So make sure you jot that down, because you're going to be sending that word back into us. The idea is you want to attend mediations in order to see other mediators so that you can observe them, critique them, some things you will like, some things you won't like. So, what about Mississippi? The same thing. There's no rule requiring mediation training for anybody in private practice. If you want to start mediating today in Mississippi, you can start. But I suggest that you attend a civil mediation training seminar so that you can learn the basics of the process and how to conduct successfully a mediation. Just like we saw earlier, we want to gain experience by attending, watching, and observing other mediators. So, just like a web designer, wedding planner, travel agent, and these other professionals, you do not need any requirements to be a family mediator. But to be on a civil list that's maintained by the ADR section of the Mississippi Bar, you need a minimum of 14 hours, and mediation training companies covers those 14 hours in a 2-day civil mediation training course. So to be on a list in Mississippi, you need 14 hours. To be on a list in Louisiana, you need 40 hours. Different entities, the Supreme Court enacted a rule for the mediators in Mississippi. The legislature in Louisiana enacted a law for mediators in the state of Louisiana. To be a family mediator, there are no separate requirements in Mississippi. You basically, if you want to be on a list of mediators, you can be a civil mediator or a family mediator. There is no distinction in Mississippi. But on the left side, you basically have to be a lawyer. My understanding is that the people who mediate in Mississippi are lawyers. There may be some other professionals and that we don't know about because it's really not regulated. Remember, it's like the wild, wild west. How do you build credibility? How are you different? How are you better? Why should the client choose you? I'll say this, it takes time. When I started as a mediator, I had 3 years of experience as a lawyer. I was an electrical engineer, and that somehow gave me some credibility when I did complicated construction cases. People thought I understood the technology behind construction, but you don't need to be an engineer to understand construction. I also had a JD, 3 years of practice, and had a master's in ADR. And so when I spoke, my bio said, those are the things that Bobby Hargis had done. How was I different? Let me tell you how I was different, and it was really a negative. In 1990, when I started, I was 30 years old. And most of the people who were mediating at that time were 10-year, 20-year lawyers, and they learned about mediation and they were trained. So you had a new lawyer with really 3 years of experience and teaching experience, but not a lot of litigation experience. But I made it. So when people tell you you can't do it, you have to find your own way. We're just talking about some ways here that you can do it. So I continued to talk. I wrote articles. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But it takes a little time. But I would say it's worth it. After more than 30 years of serving as a neutral, it's been quite a ride for me. So let's take a look here on the left of the screen. You will see a young Bobby Harges that was taken in the 90s. And on the right, you will see a picture that's my Zoom photo. You may recall in 2020, the world was shut down because of COVID-19. And this was one of the backgrounds that I used. So that's a Bobby Harges from after 30 years of being a mediator. And on the left, this is a new mediator. Who would you hire? Someone with the experience who looked a lot older, with a lot more gray hair, or somebody who's brand new? Well, it was difficult back in the early 90s to get cases from me because I was perceived as somebody who didn't know a lot. And you may say, Bobby, you didn't know a lot, but that didn't stop me. My question to you is, if you are a young lawyer, how do you get people to hire you? If you are a young lawyer, how do you get people to hire you? Because that's what you want to know. Define your market. Normally, the people who can send cases to you are judges, lawyers. If you're doing family mediation, people who are in a position to work with couples like ministers, mental health professionals, law students. You may say, how can a law student? Law students know lawyers. A lot of times their parents are attorneys, and they may know, they may learn about different medias. They may share that information. Of course, adjusters, insurance adjusters. They know a lot of lawyers, and they're often asking for good mediators. So you want to get to know those. Network actively. That's what you have to do. I don't mean just every now and then. And I tell students in law school, what you do in law school would be remembered down the line when people get out. I can recall working at Deutsche Kerrigan and Stiles. One of my law school classmates went to Milwaukee to work, and he was local counsel. He was a national counsel for a large cattle company. And they had a lot of cattle in Bogalusa, Louisiana. And he called me and said, Bobby, we have some disputes. I don't even remember what the dispute was about. I knew it was cattle. And he called me, and I remember as a young associate, I brought a really big case into the firm that I was working with. And I would say that because my law school classmate remembered me from law school. So the point is, things that you do now, people remember them down the line. So you want to have the best reputation possible. You want to do things professionally. And you want to do what you say and say what you do. You want to make sure you keep your word as a professional. You want to print new business cards when you get trained. You want to put mediation on there. This is my business card, front and back. Some people put a picture, some people don't. I just put a picture. People, I can remember doing a mediation in Jackson, Mississippi, and I had two cards. I had my MAPS card, which is here, Mediation, Arbitration, Professional Systems. And I had this card. So I gave, there was two plaintiffs in the room. And I remember giving one lady this card and the other lady this card. And I remember one of the ladies said, wait, I didn't get a card with a picture on it. Where's my card with the picture? I thought that was interesting. She thought there was something important because she had a card that had an image on the back, but it was not a picture. So I always include a picture on my cards. You want to print new business literature. Even if your biography is on the internet, people will call you and say, send me your information. And I don't think you want to say, go to the internet to get it. So you want to have some literature with the name of your law firm or the name of your company on it, so you can send that out. When you finish, I know the first thing I did was, when I was a new mediator, I got the notion that it was important to go to the local judges. So I went to judges that I knew. A lot of them, remember, were my friends from being in local bar associations and active officers. And I remember taking them business cards and literature. One of the judges in Jefferson Parish, he's now retired. This is Jefferson Parish in Gretna. I remember going over the week after he was elected, he got sworn in because it was a vacancy. The term was not up, but it was a partial term. And I went in on his first or second day in office. And this is before the gauntlet is there. You know, you have the secretary and everybody else. So when a new judge is elected, I just go in and have my literature. You can see the judge. Later on, when the gauntlet is there, it's going to be difficult for you to get in. So if you don't know the judge, you're going to be talking to the staff members, the secretary, the law clerk, and you want to talk to them and tell them what you do and what you want. Because I can remember when I walked into the judge, I said, congratulations. He said, Bobby, what do you want? I said, I'm glad you asked. You may not know about this, but there's a statute that allows you to send cases to me as a mediator. He said, really? I don't want them. You can have them. And I remember just by asking, I got a lot of cases. I still send snail mail letters. If I see someone in a conference or somewhere at a party, I send the nice to see you letter. I send it by email sometimes by regular mail, US mail. And here's a sample. It was a pleasure seeing you at the judges conference at CDC, Civil District Court. As you may recall, I'm a mediator, I'm a neutral, etc. Whatever you want to say about your skills, send that out. This was sent, wow, back in 2009, quite a while ago. Send announcements to newspapers and other trade publications. Most of them are free, no cost. One thing that you want to do is, if you are a graduate of a university or law school, you want to send notices about your mediation practice. This one was sent to the Harvard Law Bulletin in 1998. It said, Bobby Marzine Hargis, LLM, professor of law at Loyola University in New Orleans College of Law, has been elected of the section of alternative dispute resolution, elected chair of the Louisiana State Bar Association. Hargis teaches mediation and arbitration evidence, criminal law, and procedure. You notice here in this particular notice, there is a word mediation. In every thing that I do, I mention mediation and arbitration. It was an attempt years ago to brand myself. It was an attempt to brand myself years ago. And so whenever I send something out, I mention mediation and arbitration. Everybody you know should know that you are a mediator. Here's what I sent out to the Mississippi State Alumni Bulletin. I was general counsel back in, 2000 of the Louisiana Democratic Party by the Louisiana Democratic State Central Committee. And you see here, he teaches courses in mediation and arbitration, evidence, criminal law, and procedure. I think you get the point. I don't know who would see this. Some people will, some people maybe, but it's free. You have nothing to lose, perhaps something to gain. Volunteer for speaking engagements. Volunteer for speaking engagements. Before we go there, the next code word is the word alumni. And you will see that at the bottom of this page. Like, send information to alumni magazines. That's important. So the second code word is alumni. Volunteer for speaking engagements. I mentioned earlier that there is a corollary between the number of times I speak and the number of new mediations I get. So when you speak, you are seen as an expert. I always strive to be ethical, professional, and legal. I like to keep my life that way. When I do that, I won't run afoul of the law, the Bar Association, or the Supreme Court. And I tell my students when I teach at the law school, keep it ethical, keep it professional, and keep it legal. So when I speak on a topic, I normally speak on mediation, DWI law, criminal law, and evidence, speakers have to have some expertise and some knowledge. So if I'm speaking on mediation, then people in the audience will see you as having that expertise and they may hire you. So it's not hard for me to speak on those 4 topics because I've done them for years. I'll offer to any of you, if you want to speak on any of those topics, again, evidence, criminal law and procedure, evidence, or DWI law and mediation and arbitration, I have tons of material. If you want my material, just let me know. I simply ask that when you use them, just give me credit for the materials. These are my topics: ethics, professionalism. Oh, I forgot about ethics and professional, criminal law, evidence, DWI law. These are my topics. When I say professionalism and mediations, of course, I can speak on any aspect of mediation, like advocacy, confidentiality, etc. These are my topics. When you draft an agreement, when the parties are not represented by lawyers, you may want to send the document by regular mail. Not everyone uses email even today. But when you do send a couple of business cards, don't just send one, send 2 or 3 and ask them to give one to a friend. Remember your marketing. And I always tell people, a lot of my referrals, a lot of my cases come from referrals. And that sends a message that you want them to send you a referral. This was back in the 90s. I would not take out a yellow page ad today. Many of you may not know what the yellow pages are. But back in the day when I started, the yellow pages were, that was the place where you would put an ad. But that's old news. Create a web page. And I've had a lot of web pages over the years. This was my first mediation training company web page. And it was, I think, done by a student at Loyola. A student was offering I think all the professors, he was trying to get some business as a web designer. He said, I'll create a new web page. I said, great, I need one. After I started training, this was my initial divorce mediation business. It was called Conflict-Free Divorce. Loyola allows, or at least at that time, I don't think they do that now, each of the professors to get a free web page, a free personal web page. In addition to the Loyola page, you can get your own personal page. This was my personal page. Of course, I mentioned mediation and arbitration, etc. Years ago, I was a tutor for applicants who took the bar. People who were taking it the first time or primarily failed applicants. I worked with, I don't know, about 5 years, maybe 10 years with applicants who failed the Mississippi and Louisiana State Bar. And this is my website, Louisiana Bar Exam Tutor. I finally gave up the name a number of years ago because I don't use it. I got too busy. But I mentioned if you look at that, you will see mediation and arbitration there. So as, of course, today, one of the predominant means of being seen is by the internet. So make sure you decide what you want to market yourself as a personal injury mediator or as a construction mediator or whatever you need to brand and market yourself. Biographical information, if you look detailed enough, you will see in there mediation and arbitration. This is the second version of my mediation training company. And I'm going to give you now the next code word. If you look at the bottom, it says update. The next code word is update. So when you get a web page, you need to update it as time passes. So the next one is update. This is the next version. So you have to train, you have to also change your web page. So you're going to get your training. And then after you get trained, you're going to continue to do things similar to the ones we're talking about today. So if we go back, again, that's conflict-free divorce. I have, in addition to, I still have This is my conflict-free divorce social media page. As you know, Facebook is free. And one thing you want to do is to blog, and you blog frequently. Again, whenever I blog on my sites, I use the term mediation and arbitration. You want to work with a SEO person, search engine optimization, so that you want your material to be found on the first page. I think if you look at, for example, how to become a mediator in Louisiana or in Mississippi, I'm going to be on the first page. A lot of people don't go beyond the first page. You know, if you look, and I'm not, well, most people find me anyway. I'm not actively doing SEO, search engine optimization now for my mediation business because I'm pretty busy and it's not a focus now because I'm doing a lot of things, teaching and mediating and arbitrating, a special master, practicing law, a lot of things. After being a divorce mediator for a while, a family mediator, I decided to expand my services from being a conflict-free divorce mediator to conflict-free resolution. So I basically rebranded myself. You notice the black dove at the top. You want to focus. I wanted to signal peace. So if you go back to, back. You notice the dove here, conflict-free divorce. Have the same dove here, and this is my next webpage. Here, I wanted to include for you some other websites. Perry Damp is one of the largest mediation firms in Louisiana. A lot of people in Louisiana join firms as an independent contractor. I think there are 2 or 3 principals, and everybody else, like if you look at all these people, if you go to the site, you probably can't see this, but these are independent contractors primarily. You may have 2 or 3 owners here. But that is the way mediation has developed in Louisiana. And of course, you see here he has mission, mediators and arbitrators, services, testimonials, library, staff, news, and offices. And you can schedule a mediation at their site. And this is a list of their mediators from a number of years ago. It may have changed by now. This is a group I work with. You may hear me refer to MAPS. It's an acronym for Mediation Arbitration Professional Systems, Inc. I've been with them for a number of years. I started as Bobby Harges attorney mediator. Then I was with AAA on their mediation panel. Then I was with ADR, Inc. That's a local group in Louisiana. And then I joined MAPS. And I'm a member of several arbitration panels. The FMCS, Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services, the American Arbitration Association, also MAPS arbitration panel. Now, when you mediate, most of the groups will want you to have an exclusivity agreement with them when you do the civil mediations. Like I have an exclusivity agreement with MAPS for civil mediations, but for family and other mediations, and other arbitrations, I don't have an exclusivity agreement with them. So you need to work out the details of what you're going to do if you join a group. In Mississippi, you don't necessarily have the large groups. I know a lot of individuals have their own practices. They mediate in their law firms or in their mediation offices. Today, a lot of law firms are building their ADR sections. Here is one from King Miller, and this is a snapshot of their ADR mediation and arbitration section on their webpage. I think you get the idea. Hopefully you do. Also, when you're marketing yourself, there are different directories. There's one in Louisiana and there's one in Mississippi. The one in Louisiana is called the Who's Who in ADR. And you may think Who's Who is like you were selected. It's really not. If you pay your fee of $150, $150, you can get your bio and a photograph. And I can remember when it started back in the 90s, the first year I didn't join the ADR, I didn't pay. And one of my students said, "Professor, I thought you were an expert in ADR. And I didn't see you in the Who's Who directory." that was a signal to me that at least somebody was looking at the directory and they thought I should be in it. So every year since, I have paid the $150 to get in the directory. It's online, as well as it's sent out with the Bar Journal once a year. This was back in 2019. It was $125 at that time. I don't know how much it is now because my assistant handles that. So at times it says here, it's time to book a listing in Who's Who in ADR 2019. You book it by paying your fee and providing your information. If you go to the Louisiana State Bar Association's website, you will see that. And this is my listing. This is on the left here. There's my photograph, and there's my little bio. Basically tells you everything that you already know about me. The Mississippi Bar also has a directory, and these are the details. These are the qualifications. You need to have 14 hours. You need to complete the application. You have to pay $50 annually. And you need 6 hours every 2 years in order to remain listed. Those are the requirements in the great state of Mississippi. And Mississippi doesn't have, if you look at Louisiana, you have a narrative here. The Mississippi list is name, rank, and serial number. And so their list is online. There is nothing that is sent out. For those who are watching this in Mississippi, years ago when I was chair of the ADR section, I thought it would be beneficial to have a booklet like this. And as chair, I asked the administration to produce one. And it was never done. Apparently, they had no interest in doing it. And so in Mississippi, this is what you have. Online, on the internet, you click on the individual letter, and it will get you the person's name, rank, and serial number. So for those in Mississippi, if you want something like this, people actually use this booklet in Louisiana. You can have it on your desk, and you can thumb through it, and you can find mediators in their bios. And it pays for itself. But I guess Mississippi, at least at that time, they didn't have any interest when I was chair of the ADR section. Again, in Louisiana, in addition to the Who's Who, that's one separate directory. There are 3 online registers in Louisiana: the civil, the family, and the juvenile court register. And so people can pay another $100, I believe, to get on the one or more of the register. I think you have to pay $100 for each register. So you have the Who's Who, which is something that's done by the Bar Association. The ADR section maintains the 3 court registries: civil, child custody, and juvenile. And if you want more information, you can go to the Louisiana State Bar Association and its website, and you can find that information. So here's information for those who may be interested in being a juvenile court mediator. I don't want to leave that out. I don't really know a lot of juvenile court mediators in Louisiana. Some of them exist. And the statute pretty much mirrors the family and child custody mediation register. You need 40 hours or 68 hours. And these are the requirements here, excuse me, if you are a judge. So as you continue to market your practice, you want to think about putting ads in trade journals, newsletters, banquet programs, and other limited distribution publications. Years ago, to get my name known in Mississippi, I would take out an ad. This is a half-page ad, and it was, I don't know, $300. And I ran it for a number of years. I can remember when I stopped running it, people would tell me 2 or 3 years later, I see your ad, referring to current, in the Mississippi Lawyer, which is the bar journal for the Mississippi Bar. And it wasn't in there because it was in there frequently for a number of years. But I said entire state of Mississippi because I would drive anywhere. And at that time, I didn't charge any time for travel because I wanted to be competitive. Now I talk to the parties and we talk about the reasonability of travel from, for example, where I live in New Orleans to Tupelo, or New Orleans to Jackson, New Orleans to Biloxi, New Orleans to Corinth. So if you're going to bill for travel time, you need that to be known. All right, let me take a break here. I need to stop recording. All right, the break is over. Let us continue. This is an ad that I took out in a school yearbook. My son at the time was 5th grade, 6th grade, and they have a yearbook, which was strange. I didn't have a yearbook until I was in high school. And this ad cost me $100. And I can recall shortly after this ad, the book was published, I got a call from one of the dads at the school, and I got like 4 or 5 mediations. And I never asked him, was it a result of this ad? But we had known each other for years, and he knew I was a mediator. And maybe this just reminded him. So this was a $100 ad that produced thousands in revenue. So look at your local yearbooks. This was another ad that I placed in my son's yearbook. You notice it just has a picture of me and it has my name. And it said, "Congratulations, Blair Harges, on another great year. Your hard work has definitely paid off. You're growing up so fast. We are so proud of you, from your parents, Bobby Harges and Gaynell Williams." We talked about social networking. So you want to get as much presence on the web as you can: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, all the free sources, LinkedIn. You want to get on there. When you become an expert in something, people often ask you to speak. This is a request from the Louisiana State Bar Association. What was it? The LSBA mid-year meeting. They wanted someone to speak on mediation in 2023. And of course, I said yes, because I was going to be in front of a group of young lawyers. Some are in solo practice, others are with law firms, large firms. And it was an opportunity to get up there, 2:15 to 3:15 p.m., 1 hour, piece of cake for me. And when I get solicitations through email, this was one from a group of African-American neutrals, and they wanted a list of people who handled international disputes. I speak Spanish and French, and I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to send my bio. So I copied my bio, sent it back, and it's now in the directory of online international mediators who are African-American neutrals. Take advantage of opportunities that arise. Back in 2019, Loyola Law School still has a summer program in Spetses, Greece, where we have about 30 plus students who go over for 2 weeks and they take several 1-hour courses. This is Mary Grace Knapp. She was attending the program, and she asked me, could she speak to my comparative mediation and arbitration class in Spetses? And I said, sure. So Mary Grace took a few shots, and I'm sure she posted these on her social media. So this is an opportunity for you to remember reciprocity. What is reciprocity? When you do something for someone, they will likely do something for you. And so this took 5 minutes from the class. It was important to Mary Grace, not a big deal for me. Another opportunity, this is Representative Joe Marino. He's a member of the Louisiana legislature, or he was at the time that he spoke. Joe was always talking to me about coming to speak to one of my classes at Loyola University, New Orleans College of Law. And this was a DWI class I was teaching. And Joe came in to speak about the criminal justice reform bills and laws that he had sponsored that became laws. And he took a class, not a problem for me. Reciprocity. I'm sure if I called Joe, Joe might want to respond in kind. Again, as a mediator, we're going to recap here. Develop a marketing strategy. Define your market. Identify your market. Determine how you will reach those people. What is your service? Who's your competition? What are they doing? The next code word is market, as in always market yourself. Market, market, market. How do you build credibility? How are you different? Why should you be chosen by the client? It takes time. Be patient, be persistent, and it finally pays off. It will pay off. Thank you for your attention. One last thing. I want each of you, as part of this lecture, to write down 5 things that you will do once you become a mediator in order to market yourself, and send those in to me with the code words and code phrases. Thank you much for your attention, and please enjoy the rest of your day.